Greetings everyone, and welcome to Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work, where we find out how one man manages to keep himself busy, physically active, and mentally engaged after retirement with projects. Today's project? Well, it's part 2 on our restoration of our fishing skiff, the Skinny Dipper. Check it out. We Welcome back, and hey, quick refresher. This is the Skinny Dipper. It's a custom-built skiff designed specifically for fishing the shallow near-shore and inshore waters here in the state of Florida. Now, it's about 12 years old now, and it was in serious need of a makeover. So in part 1, we stripped off all the gear, and then we flipped it over and repaired all the various dings and cuts and bruises, and then painted the bottom. Now in part 2, we're about to flip it back over and do the same thing topside. Hey, you may recall that we actually built 2 of these. Mine, which was the prototype boat, and then Ted's here, which was the actual entire production run. Anyway, 12 years later, I ended up with Ted's boat as well, and I've just started refurbishing it. When it's done, it's going to be going to my granddaughter and her husband, who actually live over in the Big Bend area of Florida, and that's some of the best shallow flats fishing in the entire state. Now, this boat took a really big hit on the back end when it was sitting out in Ted's yard from a limb that fell on it. So the last couple of weeks I've been doing reconstructive surgery on the back. That's now finished, turned out really, really well. And I started putting the first coat of paint on the top. Now, they chose a really attractive gray color for theirs, so coat number 1's on. I'll probably be putting coat number 2 on a little bit later today, and sometime in the next 3 or 4 days we'll flip it over and I'll start on the bottom. The first episode ran about 30 minutes. Now, I'd hoped to finish this up in 2 episodes, but I reviewed the balance of my footage and I still had enough left over for another 2 hours. Well, even if I cut it down to 1 hour, that's way too much, so I've decided to turn this into a 3-part series. Now, today we're going to concentrate solely on top half repairs. Next episode, we'll reassemble and button her up. Let's get started. All right, the boat has been put on the trailer. It was flipped over. We didn't really hear any water of any sort inside. That's good, so hopefully it's dried out inside the hull. And now I'm starting the cleanup process. It's already had a really good bath previously. And now I think the first thing I have to do before I really get a lot of sanding down on the top here is try and get some of this caulk off. And I'm not really sure how to do that. You hit it with a sander, it just kind of laughs at you. I read where you could use a heat gun on it, soften it, and I thought, well, I'll try that on a low setting. And on the low setting, it caused the fiberglass coating to bubble and peel. So that didn't work too well. Well, I'll keep trying, and when I come up with something that works, I'll let you know. Hopefully I don't have to just work at it one little tiny bit at a time and scrape it all off that'd be hours of work doing that. And the first of 6 hatches is done. Hey, I made a few mistakes, gouged a few things. I mentioned this one already that I did with the heat gun. Here, I tried something different and I just thought, well, maybe I can use a sanding flap, something like this. Nope, that went straight down, tore through the fiberglass. Tried a couple of cool little gadgets that Dremel has, and the one that ended up being the best one was the one I started out with, that cupped. And this, by the way, is what it looks like after doing 1 hatch. So it looks like I'll be visiting the store and picking up a few extras. Also, this answers some questions I had, like, for example, right here. How am I going to get in here and cut this out? Dremel does a great job. Here's one over here that just was a big crack, and I just took it out with that little Dremel piece. So that will also allow me to get into little corners like you see down in here. and clean up real well, because I'm going to re-glass all of the edges on this, because on some of these, somewhere I have leaks. So we're going to make it look pretty again. Excellent. 1 down, 5 to go. And I have officially reached the point that I've been anticipating and dreading all at the same time. That is cutting open this deck floor to see what's inside. Well, I'm reminded that, I guess to cut corners, we decided to use styrofoam as insulation. Now, styrofoam is a good insulation. It does, however, have a tendency to kind of collect water. So it's wet. Now, I was hoping it was just going to be in this one center section, and this, by the way, is not styrofoam, but it is just completely soaked. And then down here, I cut a corner, another little plug out, because right here we have a wall. And sure enough, down inside there, it's all styrofoam as well, and it's also very wet. So this raises the question of exactly how do I deal with this? Well, I think what it really means is that the entire boat floor, from stem to stern, is wet inside, and there's really not anything I can do about it shy of just cutting out the entire floor and starting over. And let me tell you, I'm not interested at all in doing that. So what this is doing is it's adding a little extra weight to the boat, and that's about it. I want to dry this out as best as I can and give it a little more consideration. Maybe I can think of something better to do, but good Lord, you're looking at cutting the floor out of every single one of these holes and draining it. No, not really interested in doing that. I think my biggest challenge will be at this point to try and figure out how to seal the boat properly so that we don't get any water down inside the hull again. Well, I've been fishing around here trying to figure out where the water got into the hull from. And this is the battery box. You can see the crosshatch made by the battery tray sitting there all those years. And it turns out, I just figured this out the other day, that right here, this was deep enough that water was seeping back up through it. And then over here, for example, there's a hole here for the screws that held this down. Well, I just realized that hole goes all the way through. It was not sealed, and there's multiple holes like that. And that was absolutely a way for water to get in by this battery box underneath there. So I've sat this, I drilled this out and kept it open, and been using a cloth to get the water out and squeeze it out and put it back in there and get it out. Now it's pretty dry after 24 hours. So I think that is where my big issue is coming with from this part of the boat. There's no other holes anywhere with the exception of over here, where I also had a crack right across here, and water was getting inside. So this has been drying now for about 48 hours, and it's nice and dry. So I do believe that I may have found my 2 egress points for water to get inside underneath the deck. So I think what I'll end up doing is just filling all this with expanding foam, structural foam, and then we'll put either these old pieces back here, or I have a new sheet on order. All right, it's science experiment time. We're gonna have a little fun right now. This is flotation foam. It's a 2-part polyurethane foam, it says. Got a base resin and an activator, and you mix these two together, stir for 15 to 25 seconds, about 25 seconds in this temperature, and then it reacts, and then you pour it in wherever you pour it in, and it expands. This is also the type that is designed for compression. It's a real heavy duty when they had 2 versions available. So I've never done this before. We're going to see how well it works. This is how I intended to make this floor solid instead of putting back in the pieces that were underneath it. So what I'll do, I'll be pouring this in and then letting it expand, and it'll overflow at some point. And then I'll trim it down underneath, and then actually probably just drop the old pieces back in, and then seal it all real good, and you'll never know it was taken apart. All right, I'm going to start off putting a little bit in this little hole here, and then I'm going to pour in this direction, and let's see what happens. So 25 seconds at 80 degrees, excuse me, actually that was a little over 80 degrees, it's 15 seconds. No swirls. That's looking pretty good. 20. Got a few swirls left. That's about it. All right, and yeah. All right, so a little bit goes in here. I don't know how much bigger it gets. And then we're going to pour it in here, and we're going to watch and see what happens. I think it said it takes 400 seconds for it to completely activate, and it does get pretty hot. So again, about 400 seconds or 7 minutes after you've mixed it and poured, it should be fully cured. It's working. I'll come back to this and show you the finished product. And here's what we have as a result. This is about 25 minutes later. A little bit like a rock. So this is good. I'm going to go ahead and finish this out. Pour more on this one. I've got one more hole in the back that's got to be taken care of. And sometime tomorrow I'll probably get out here and trim this stuff down, which will be interesting. And actually, let's just kind of see if it cuts easy or not. Now, I'm sure cutting off the top won't be that bad. Yeah, boy. So, I'll have to figure out a way to get through all that, particularly when it's up above this surface here, and I need to get it ground down below that, so we'll figure out something. And it is time. All right, it's time to do the big patch. So, previously in the picture, you saw that I took a piece of this material, cut it to the right size, so it would drop in there, flipped it over, filled the back full of resin, covered it up with a piece of cloth, fiberglass cloth, and then soaked that good with resin. This is sat, it's now dried. Then all my little cleanup work, which I did in here with a Dremel. Got it nice and level, so that now it sits good and even for the most part. Little tiny bit of a rise right there. That's going to be sanded away later. But it's just below the level here, which is what I wanted. So, now we're going to fill these edges. Then we're going to drop a piece of cloth on top. And we're going to fill in around that. And that'll give us our base cover. Let me put a weight on there to hold that down. And I'll possibly do a second one, spread it out even wider so that when I sand it all down, it'll taper in nicely and be nice and smooth and not show a lump of any sort. Let's see how we do. For me, this is the best guess on how well this is going to work. I am worried about this margin around here and how well the fiberglass will hold it in if I don't have this solid. Kind of makes me think I might want to mix some of that filler and put in there first. What do you think? Yeah, I think I'll do that. I'm going to put filler in there and let that dry, then I'll come back and finish this process. that should work really well.
Yesterday I set this in place and I poured some epoxy resin, 2-part resin around it, kind of to help lock it down. But you can see I have some movement here, and so it means I have a gap underneath at this point. A little bit of a gap underneath at this point as well. And I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to try and do here is I've mixed up some of this filler, and my intent is to force that down into the gap as much as possible. Hopefully get some of it underneath where it will harden, and I won't be running the risk of standing on it and compressing it. So we're going to put a liberal amount in these gaps. Nice solid steel. Yeah, that's working pretty good. And when it starts coming back out, that means that I've got it in there well. We'll let this set overnight. And it should be a nice, solid seal.
Finally, after I don't know how many weeks, we're priming the inside of the boat. I'm doing inside the foot area, standing area, and the upper surfaces. So interesting how this manages to bring to your attention things that you've missed previously. I have spotted a few inconsistencies that I'll have to deal with a little bit later. Also, this area of the major patch, I ran out of resin, so I've got more on order. So I'm not gonna paint that because it needs to be, or prime it. It's a little bit rough still. I need to fill it in just a little bit more and sand it a little bit smoother. But I think that's going to look really good when it's finished. So let's continue the priming process, and we'll see how the boat looks when it's done. Each section is getting wiped down and clean as I go. Okay, our first coat of primer is in place over the top. Looks pretty good. There'll be some sanding after the fact. Again, this area needs a little more fiberglass work done before it gets covered. But I think I have probably a quart left, and I'll just do some touch-up after I've done the first initial sanding. You see little spots like, see if that'll show up. Yeah, like this right here. It didn't fill well, so I'll redo that and fill those. And I have some, there you go, pretty rough orange peel I'll have to get off. Well, you walk away for 24 hours and here's what you find down inside the little cubby holes. We have these Carolina wrens here, and they will build a nest in short order. Fortunately, this one has nothing in it but nest, no eggs, so it can come out. So whenever you're working on a project, you're typically not working on just one project at a time. In this case, this morning, I am working on 4 different projects at one time. First, of course, is the skinny dipper. This is the most important one at the moment, and we'll be doing some more painting on that this morning. At the same time, I'm restoring these old benches that we were given that are made out of wakeboards, and these things are really nice. They sit out at the lake on the beach or on the dock, and they took a pretty good beating over the last couple of years, so they're getting the same paint and primer that the boat gets because they are made out of fiberglass. Third is the canoe. getting a coat of primer this morning on the bottom patch, a second coat of primer. And then fourth are these trusses, which are going to go up here. And we're going to do a lean-to extension on the pole barn. Now they came in black. My other trusses up top there are red. So we're going to be painting these trusses red. And I've just kind of temporarily hung them on the poles so I can get access to them. Getting ready to wash those, let them dry. We'll paint them this afternoon. Making progress. All right, so the entire boat now has one coat of paint on it. The lockers all have two. As far as I'm concerned, the lockers are pretty much finished. They'll be fine. I've got one coat on all these upper surfaces, except with the exception of inside of here. So that's going to get painted next. And these upper surfaces have all been hit with this, but there's still a little bit of rough on it. And I'm going to come back and just hit it with 220 on the orbital. Not trying to make it perfect, just kind of knock off any of the little dust particles that got into it yesterday, because we had a little bit of wind. I'm then going to go ahead and paint the top out here in the barn with a second coat. Not much wind today. Anything that gets in there I can knock off when I go to put the third coat on. That will be the third and final coat, and that will be done inside the garage. That really is a lot smoother. I'm going to finish off the front end and we'll start painting. All right, I've got a second coat in all the wells, all the boxes on the boat. And I went ahead while I was at it, put a first coat of paint onto the top surface. And it looks really, really good. Now, this is being painted outside. So I'm probably going to get a little dust or debris that blows into it today. There's a light breeze out here. That's fine. I'll be sanding it after the fact, and when it's time to do the actual finish coats, the second and third coats, that will be done in the garage. Looking really good. All right, I got some paint in my paint tray, 2 different size rollers and a brush. I'm going to give a little wipe down, get dust off using the prep all, and you can use mineral spirits or paint thinner for this. It dries really fast and it does a great job of picking up dust. So I'm going to do this as I do a section. Just kind of mentally lay out these sections as I go. I don't know if you can see that, but a lot came off on it there. Here on the inside, we're not, you hear me say this a lot, but this is not detail work. It's hidden inside where the gas can goes, so it doesn't have to be all that pretty. Pretty happens on the outside. We'll show you that in a minute. Now there's a process here called roll and tip. So what you do is you roll the paint on with a roller, and then you come back behind it with a brush, and you lightly brush over it and tip it. And that tipping with the brush covers up any, or spreads out any big puddles of paint, and gets rid of any inconsistencies and your overlaps. And it has to be done pretty much right away, or it won't work. So you do this with 2 people. One person's brushing and one person's rolling. In this case, it's just me, so I'll be doing small sections at a time on these areas. Oops, that are visible. Not so concerned about it like up in these bay areas or down in there. but the floor and the surface on the top, yes. And good morning. Here we are following morning after putting that second coat of paint on the top and the first coat of paint inside the cockpit. Looks great. I already buffed it out a little bit this morning. I'll buff it just a little bit more. I've got a couple of things like this that I missed I'd like to take off. And if you look closer, you can see here and here overlaps from the paint. So the second coat of paint will cover that up. So we'll put a second coat inside here this morning, and then we will let it dry overnight, and tomorrow or sometime this weekend, coat number 3 will go on the entire upper portion of the boat. And you'll notice, by the way, I put cardboard down because in here yesterday we discovered that bird's nest, and that little wren was poking around here again last night, looking to get back into her spot. Well, believe it or not, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost done. Today marks a major milestone. We are just about 2 months into this project, just 2 days shy of 2 months. And today we put the final coat on the top side. I'll probably let it cure for about 2 days, and then we'll flip it over and we'll do the final coat on the bottom side. Then we start reassembly. I tell you what, I'm ready. I actually went out, bought myself a new fishing pole. So, time to get this baby done so I can go catch some fish. And it's time to paint. Now, I'm not going to take you all the way through this and make you watch the whole thing. We've done this before. You understand the process. It's roll it and tip it. And I'm going to start inside the wells, do inside the cockpit, the additional wells, and do the top surfaces. One thing I have done in advance, using this and also using 220 sandpaper, I've been over the entire surface, taking off any surface imperfections that was sitting outside, so there was a little bit of wind-blown dust that went in there. So it's nice and smooth now overall. Little pieces here and there, nothing much to worry about. Then I went at it with that Prep All Cleaner material that I have. And boy, it took up a lot of dirt. This is the rag number 4 that I went through, and they were filthy by the time I was done. So there was a lot of wind-blown dust and dirt on the surface. That all has to come off first. That's done. Time to paint. All right, we have taken the boat off the trailer, flipped her over, and put it back on the trailer. It turns out that I got a little bit of damage to the paint from the bunks. So before I put it back on, there's a big scuff. We put some heavy carpet down, and then we've picked this thing up and gently set it down, face down, onto the trailer. So what I'm going to end up doing here is just hitting it lightly with sander over there. And that's what I did. Hey, a little light sanding and all the blemishes were gone. Now, it takes a few days for the paint to harden enough to really handle much weight. And I think that's where my mistake was. The third coat turned out great. And it was 4 or 5 days before we flipped it back over and started the reassembly process. Well, that's it for this episode. Next episode, we put it all back together. Thanks for watching, and as always, questions and comments are welcome, and please remember to like and share and subscribe. I'll see you next time on Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work. Oh, Papa out.